The morning alarm screamed across New Haven Colony like a wounded animal. David Harris dropped his wrench and ran toward the main building, his boots splashing through puddles from last night's rain. Other colonists were running too, their faces painted with worry and fear. Inside the command center, Administrator Tom Bradley stood before a crowd of scared people. His usually calm voice shook as he spoke. 3 Vorthak cubs are missing. Their mother has been walking around our fence since sunrise. David felt his stomach drop. Everyone on Kepler 442b knew about the Vorthak. They were the kings of this planet, huge wolf-like beasts that could read minds and had claws sharp enough to cut through their strongest metal. A mother looking for her babies was the worst possible nightmare. How big are the cubs? Asked Dr. Emma Walsh, the colony's animal expert. Small now, maybe the size of house cats. But they grow fast, Bradley answered, wiping sweat from his forehead. And their mother, we call her Razormore for good reason. Security Chief Bob Kane stepped up to the front. His old soldier's face was hard as stone. I've got 12 full-grown Vorthaks surrounding us right now. Maybe more coming. They're not attacking yet, but they're getting closer. Through the thick windows, David could see them. Each creature stood as tall as a small building, their silver-black fur moving in the wind. They looked like giant wolves, but their golden eyes glowed with intelligence that was almost human. Razormore was the closest, pacing back and forth near the colony's main gate. She kept making long, sad howling sounds that made David's heart hurt just to hear them. The translation machine is picking up her thoughts, Kane continued. She's not happy. Says if we don't give back her cubs, she'll burn our whole settlement down. An old woman in the crowd started crying. We're all going to die. Those things will tear us apart. Calm down, Mrs. Patterson, Bradley said, but his voice didn't sound calm at all. We have defenses. Our walls are strong. Kane shook his head. Sir, those walls won't stop an angry Vorthak pack. I've seen what they can do. During the first colony attempt on Rigel 7, a single Vorthak destroyed an entire outpost in under 10 minutes. David remembered that story. Everyone did. It was why most humans stayed far away from planets where Vorthak lived. New Haven was supposed to be safe because the Vorthak here usually avoided humans. They had an understanding. The humans stayed in their small area, and the Vorthak left them alone. How long do we have? Someone shouted from the back. Kane checked his watch. Based on what we know about their behavior, maybe 6 hours. After that, Mother's instinct will take over. She'll stop thinking and start killing anything she sees as a threat. Dr. Walsh raised her hand. The cubs are babies. They might have wandered into our buildings looking for food or warmth. They could be hiding anywhere, in storage rooms, under equipment, even in the air vents. Bradley nodded quickly. Good thinking. We need search teams. Check every corner, every room, every possible hiding spot. What about weapons? Asked Miller, the head of maintenance. Shouldn't we be getting ready to fight? Kane's laugh was bitter. Our plasma rifles might sting them a little. But 12 adult Vorthak? Would be dead before we could fire a second shot. The crowd started talking all at once, voices rising with panic. David looked around at his neighbors, people he'd worked with, eaten with, shared stories with during the long winter nights. There was Mary the cook, always smiling and making jokes. There was old Ben who told the best stories about Earth. There was little Sally, only 8 years old, clutching her mother's hand with wide, scared eyes. Listen up. Bradley's voice cut through the noise. We're going to find these cubs and return them safely. That's our only option. Kane, organize the search teams. Walsh, I want you studying everything we know about young Vorthak behavior. Maybe there's something that can help us. As people started moving, David found himself thinking about the cubs. What would baby Vorthak even look like? Were they as scary as their parents, or were they just frightened children, lost and looking for their mother? The building shook slightly. Through the windows, they could see more Vorthak arriving. The pack was growing larger by the hour, and their calls were getting louder and more desperate. Razormore had stopped pacing and was now sitting directly in front of the main gate, staring at the human buildings with those burning golden eyes. David had been on Kepler 442b for 3 years. He'd seen Vorthak from a distance before, usually just shadows moving through the forest. But he'd never seen them this close, never seen so many together. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, like living legends made real. The translation machine crackled to life again. Razormore's voice filled the room, converted from her thoughts into words they could understand. My little ones are afraid. They call for me, but I cannot find them. If the two legs have taken them, if they have hurt them, I will make the sky rain fire. The room went completely silent. Even little Sally stopped crying. Kane cleared his throat. All right, people. You heard her. We've got 6 hours to find 3 baby Vorthak in a colony of 500 buildings. Let's move. As everyone rushed out to start searching, David stayed behind for a moment, looking through the window at Razormore. The giant creature's head was tilted slightly, as if she was listening for something. Her cubs? Probably. David thought about his own family back on Earth, his sister's kids, who he hadn't seen in years. He tried to imagine how he'd feel if they went missing. Maybe Vorthak weren't so different from humans after all. Bob Kane divided the colonists into groups of 3. Each team got a scanner, a radio, and a map of the colony. David found himself paired with Dr. Emma Walsh and Jack Miller from maintenance. Emma carried the bioscanner while Jack knew every pipe and vent in the settlement. We'll take the residential section, Emma said, adjusting her scanner. The cubs might have been drawn to areas where people live. Sometimes young animals seek out the scent of other families. The residential area was a maze of small buildings connected by covered walkways. Each family had their own unit with basic furniture and personal belongings from Earth. David had walked these paths hundreds of times, but today everything felt different. Every shadow could be hiding a lost cub. Jack knelt beside an air vent near the first building. These vents are big enough for small creatures. The cubs could have crawled through the whole ventilation system by now. He unscrewed the metal grate and peered inside with his flashlight. Nothing but dust and darkness. Emma's scanner beeped softly as she swept it across the ground. I'm picking up traces of something, but it's very faint. Could be the cubs passed through here, or it could just be local wildlife. They moved from building to building. Each empty room felt like a step closer to disaster. Through the windows, they could see more Vorthak arriving outside the colony walls. The pack was growing larger every hour. Their howls filled the air with sounds of anger and worry. Team 3 to all search units, Kane's voice crackled over the radio. We've checked the main storage area and the power plant. No sign of the cubs. Time remaining, 4 hours and 30 minutes. David wiped sweat from his forehead. The twin suns of Kepler 442b were getting higher, making the day hot and bright. But inside the buildings, searching through dark corners and cramped spaces, he felt cold with fear. Wait, Jack said suddenly. He was looking at another air vent, this one near the cafeteria. This grate has been moved recently. See these scratch marks on the metal? Something with claws definitely went through here. Emma hurried over with her scanner. The device started beeping faster as she pointed it at the vent opening. Definite biosignatures. 3 small life forms, moving through the ventilation system sometime in the last few days. They followed the trail from vent to vent, Jack using his knowledge of the building layout to guess where the passages led. The scanner readings got stronger near the center of the residential area, then seemed to split up. They separated, Emma said, frowning at her readings. 2 cubs went toward the east wing, 1 went toward the west. Or they came back together somewhere else, Jack suggested. These vents connect in weird ways. I helped build this system, there are junction points where multiple passages meet. Outside, the translation machine broadcast another message from Razormore. The sun moves across the sky, but my children do not return to me. The 2 legs must know where they are. Soon I will have no choice but to take action. David looked through a window and saw the massive Mother Vorthak standing at the colony gate. Her golden eyes seemed to be looking directly at him. Other adult Vorthak had spread out around the entire settlement, creating a perfect circle. There was no way to escape even if they wanted to. Team 7 to Kane, another voice came over the radio. We found claw marks in the hydroponics lab. Looks like something small was trying to reach the food dispensers. Team 2 here, came another report. Found what might be sleeping spots in the old equipment storage. 3 small depressions in some fabric, still warm. Emma looked excited. They're definitely inside the colony. And they're trying to find food and shelter. That's normal behavior for lost young animals. But David noticed something else in the radio reports. The evidence was from different areas of the settlement, but all the locations had one thing in common: they were places where people lived and worked closely together. The hydroponics lab where families grew their food. The storage area where workers took breaks. The residential section where everyone spent their off-duty hours. Emma, he said slowly, what if the cubs aren't just looking for any shelter? What if they're looking for something specific? Like what? David thought about his own loneliness since arriving at New Haven. 3 years of keeping to himself, eating meals alone, spending evenings in his empty quarters. Most people had families or close friends, but David had kept his distance from everyone. It was easier than risking more pain. "What if they are looking for companionship?" he said. "You said young animals sometimes seek out family sense. But what if these cubs can sense emotion somehow? Vorthak are telepathic, right?" Emma's eyes widened. "You think they might be drawn to emotional states rather than just physical sense?" Before David could answer, Jack's radio squawked with an emergency tone. "All teams, this is Kane. We've got movement outside. The Vorthak pack is getting restless. Razormore just started pacing again, and she's making different sounds now. Angrier sounds." Through the window, David could see that Jack was right. The giant mother creature was no longer sitting calmly. She was walking back and forth, her massive head swinging from side to side. The other Vorthak were moving too, stepping closer to the colony walls. "Time remaining?" Emma asked into her radio. 2 hours, maybe less. Their behavior is escalating faster than we expected." David felt his heart racing. 2 hours to search the remaining residential buildings. 2 hours before a pack of the galaxy's most dangerous predators decided that patience was no longer an option. Emma's scanner suddenly started beeping much faster. She pointed it toward a section of the residential area they hadn't checked yet, the quiet wing where the maintenance staff lived. "Strong signals," she said excitedly. 3 life forms, very close together. This way." They ran toward the maintenance quarters, David's pulse pounding in his ears. Behind them, Razormore's howls grew louder and more desperate, counting down the minutes until their peaceful little colony would become a battlefield. Emma's scanner was going crazy as they reached the maintenance quarters. The beeping was so fast it sounded like one long alarm. She held up her hand to stop David and Jack from moving forward. "The signals are coming from that building," she whispered, pointing to a small unit at the end of the row. 3 life forms, all together in one room. David looked at the building and felt his stomach twist. It was his own quarters. His home for the past 3 years, a simple room with a bed, a desk, and not much else. He rarely had visitors. Most people in the colony thought he was unfriendly because he kept to himself. "That's my place," he said quietly. Jack raised his eyebrows. "Your place? David, have you seen anything unusual lately? Heard strange noises?" David's mind raced back over the past few days. He had been working long shifts, trying to keep busy and avoid thinking about the anniversary of the accident. The transport crash that took his wife Sarah and his little girl Lucy had happened 3 years ago this week. He always got depressed around this time. But now that he thought about it, there had been some odd sounds. Soft scratching in the walls at night. Little chirping noises that he figured were just the building settling or maybe small local animals. He had been so lost in his own sadness that he hadn't paid much attention. "Maybe some small sounds," he admitted. "I thought it was just normal building noise." Emma checked her scanner again. The readings were incredibly strong now. "David, I need you to go to your door very slowly. Don't make any sudden movements. If the cubs are inside, they might be scared." As they approached David's quarters, they could hear something. Very soft sounds, like tiny animals making content little noises. Jack pulled out his flashlight, even though it was daylight. Emma held her scanner ready. David reached for his door handle. His hand was shaking a little. "What if they attack me? Even baby Vorthak have claws, right?" "Young animals usually only attack when they feel threatened," Emma said. "If they've been in your room for days and haven't hurt anything, they probably aren't aggressive." The door was unlocked. David always forgot to lock it because nothing exciting ever happened in the maintenance section. He pushed it open very slowly and stepped inside. The sight that greeted him made him freeze completely. He was looking at his own bed, where he had been sleeping for 3 nights. But he wasn't alone in the bed. 3 small creatures were curled up right in the center of his mattress, snuggled together in a little pile. They were about the size of house cats, but they definitely weren't cats. They had the silver-black fur of their mother, but it was soft and fluffy like puppy fur. Their tiny faces had the wolf-like features of adult Vorthak, but everything was smaller and rounder. Their little ears were folded down, and their eyes were closed in peaceful sleep. They were making quiet purring sounds, like the most content animals in the universe. "Oh my God," Emma whispered from behind him. "There they are." One of the cubs heard her voice and opened its eyes. Instead of the fierce golden gaze of an adult Vorthak, the cub had bright, curious eyes that looked almost friendly. It tilted its tiny head and made a soft chirping sound. David took a step closer, and all 3 cubs woke up. But they didn't run away or try to attack. Instead, they stretched like sleepy kittens and looked at him with what seemed like recognition. One of them even made a happy little yip sound. "They know you," Emma said in amazement. "David, how long have they been here?" David moved closer to his bed, and the cubs didn't seem afraid at all. In fact, they seemed excited to see him. One of them, the smallest one, crawled to the edge of the bed and reached out with a tiny paw, as if asking to be picked up. I think they've been here for 3 days, David said slowly. "I remember now. I've been hearing small sounds, and I thought I was dreaming, but sometimes when I woke up, I felt warmer than usual. Like something had been sleeping next to me." He sat down carefully on the edge of his bed. The cubs immediately crawled toward him, climbing over each other to get closer. Their tiny claws gripped his work shirt, but they were careful not to scratch him. "This is incredible," Emma said, taking readings with her scanner. "David, they're completely relaxed. Their heart rates are slow and steady, like they feel totally safe." Jack was staring with his mouth open. "These are supposed to be the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. They look like puppies." The smallest cub managed to climb up onto David's lap. It curled up in a ball and started purring again. David found himself gently petting its soft fur without even thinking about it. "They were scared when they first came," David said, the memories coming back to him now. "I heard crying sounds 3 nights ago. I thought it was the wind, but when I got up to check, I found wet spots on my floor. Like tears." Emma's scanner was showing readings she had never seen before. "David, their brain activity is showing strong emotional bonding patterns. They're not just tolerating you, they actually care about you." Outside, they could hear Razormore's howls getting louder and more frantic. The mother Vorthak could probably sense that her cubs were nearby, but she couldn't understand why they weren't coming to her. David looked down at the 3 tiny creatures who had somehow found their way into his lonely life. For the first time in 3 years, since losing his own family, he felt like he wasn't completely alone. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Through the window, they could see Security Chief Kane running toward the building, followed by several other colonists. The translation machine was broadcasting Razormore's increasingly desperate thoughts. "My children are close. I can feel them. But why do they not answer my calls?" The cubs on David's bed stirred at the sound of their mother's voice, but they didn't try to leave. Instead, they pressed closer to David, as if asking him to protect them from the scary sounds outside. Emma looked at her readings one more time, then at David's face as he held the baby Vorthak. "Now," she said softly, "we figure out how to explain this to their mother." Kane burst through David's door with his weapon drawn, followed by 3 other security officers. He stopped dead when he saw David sitting on his bed with 3 baby Vorthak cuddled in his lap like sleeping kittens. "What in the hell?" Kane started, then caught himself. He slowly lowered his rifle. "David, are you hurt? Did they attack you?" "No," David said softly, not wanting to startle the cubs. "They're just babies. They've been here for 3 days. I think they were scared and looking for somewhere safe." Emma was taking readings with every device she had. Her face showed pure amazement as she looked at the numbers. "Bob, you need to see this. The cubs' brain scans are showing something I've never seen before in Vorthak studies." Kane approached carefully, his soldier's instincts still on high alert. But as he got closer, he could see that the tiny creatures were completely calm. One of them was even licking David's hand like a friendly puppy. "Emma, we don't have time for scientific studies," Kane said. "That mother outside is going to lose her patience any minute. We need to get these cubs back to her before she tears down our walls." "That's just it," Emma said excitedly. "I don't think it's going to be that simple. Look at these readings." She showed Kane her scanner. Adult Vorthak have brain patterns that show aggression, hunting instincts, and territorial behavior. But these babies are showing something completely different. They're showing attachment patterns, the same kind we see in human children who bond with their parents. David felt one of the cubs nuzzle against his chest. It was making a soft humming sound that seemed almost musical. "What does that mean?" "It means they've bonded with you," Emma explained. Young Vorthak, before they develop their adult hunting instincts, are naturally empathetic. They can sense emotions telepathically, just like their parents, but they respond to sadness and loneliness instead of fear and anger. Kane shook his head. "You're telling me these killer monsters chose David because he was sad?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Emma said. "David, you've been struggling with depression since the anniversary of your family's death, haven't you?" David nodded, feeling embarrassed. "I try not to let it show, but this week has been really hard. Sarah and Lucid died 3 years ago this week. I've been having trouble sleeping, staying in my room more than usual. Your emotional pain created a telepathic signal, Emma continued. These cubs sensed another being in distress and came looking for you. They didn't see a human, they saw someone who needed comfort, just like they did when they got separated from their mother. Outside, the translation machine suddenly activated with a powerful signal. Razoremore's voice filled the room. My little ones. I feel them, they are content? How can this be? They should be afraid, calling for me. One of the cubs on David's lap heard its mother's voice and lifted its tiny head. It made a small chirping sound toward the window, but it didn't try to run away. Instead, it looked up at David as if asking for permission. She can sense their emotional state, Emma realized. Razormore knows her cubs are safe and happy, but she can't understand why they're not coming to her. Kane's radio crackled with urgent reports from his security teams. Sir, the Vorthak pack is getting confused. They're not advancing anymore, but they're not backing down either. It's like they don't know what to do. David gently stroked the smallest cub's fur. They found me when I needed them most, he said quietly. And I think maybe I helped them when they needed someone too. They were lost and scared, just like I was. Emma was taking more readings, her excitement growing by the minute. David, your brain is showing the same attachment patterns as the cubs. You've formed a parental bond with them in just 3 days. This is unprecedented. What do we do now? Kane asked. We can't keep them forever. That mother out there isn't going to wait much longer. David looked down at the 3 tiny faces looking back at him with trust and affection. He had felt so empty for so long after losing his family. These little creatures had filled a hole in his heart that he thought would never heal. We have to try to explain to their mother, David said. Maybe if she understands that we're not holding them prisoner, that they came to me by choice. The translation machine activated again, this time with a different tone. Razoremore's voice was confused rather than angry. The 2-leg, he protects my young? But why? What does he gain from this? Emma grabbed the portable communicator that could broadcast thoughts back to the Vorthak. David, I want you to try something. Think about how you feel about the cubs. Focus on your emotions while I broadcast your thoughts to their mother. David closed his eyes and thought about the past 3 days. How empty he had felt before the cubs arrived. How their tiny purring sounds had helped him sleep peacefully for the first time in months. How taking care of them had given him a purpose again. The translation machine hummed with activity as David's thoughts were converted and sent to Razormore. Outside, they could hear the giant creature making different sounds, not howls of anger, but something that sounded almost like surprise. After a long moment, Razoremore's voice came back through the machine, softer than before. The 2-leg grieves for lost cubs of his own. My little ones, they comfort his pain, as he comforts theirs. This is pack behavior. Kane looked at Emma with wide eyes. Did she just say what I think she said? Emma nodded slowly. I think she's starting to understand that David isn't a threat. His family. The cubs on David's bed suddenly became more active, chirping and looking toward the window where they could sense their mother's presence. But they still didn't try to leave David's side. Instead, the smallest one climbed up to his shoulder and nuzzled his cheek. Outside, the sounds of the Vorthak pack were changing too. Instead of aggressive growls and threatening postures, they seemed to be having some kind of discussion among themselves. David felt a warm feeling spreading through his chest that he hadn't experienced in 3 years. It felt like hope. David stood at the colony's main gate, holding the 3 cubs gently in his arms. Emma walked beside him with the translation device, while Kane and his security team watched nervously from behind the reinforced barriers. Every colonist in New Haven was either hiding in the bunkers or watching from windows, waiting to see what would happen next. Razormore sat just outside the gate, her massive form perfectly still. She was even bigger up close than David had imagined, nearly 4 meters tall, with muscles that rippled under her silver-black fur. Her golden eyes were fixed on the cubs in David's arms, but her expression wasn't angry anymore. It was curious, almost confused. The other Vorthak had formed a wide circle around the meeting area, but they had backed away to give their leader space. David could feel their eyes on him, studying his every movement. Remember, Emma whispered, move slowly and keep your emotions calm. She can sense everything you're feeling. David took a deep breath and walked closer to the fence. The cubs in his arms started making excited chirping sounds when they saw their mother, but they didn't struggle to get away from him. Instead, they seemed to be trying to communicate something to her. Razormore tilted her massive head, listening to her cub's sounds. The translation device picked up her thoughts. They speak of kindness, of comfort in the dark, of one who shares their sadness. David stopped about 3 meters from the fence. This close, he could see every detail of the great predator's face. Her teeth were like white daggers, and her claws could easily tear through the metal barrier between them. But her eyes looked almost gentle as she watched her babies. "I'm going to set them down," David said quietly to Emma. "Let them choose what they want to do." He knelt and carefully placed the 3 cubs on the ground. They immediately ran toward the fence, but not to escape through it. Instead, they pressed their tiny bodies against the metal barrier and reached their paws toward their mother, making soft crying sounds. Razormore lowered her great head and touched her nose to the fence where her cubs were reaching for her. The babies chirped happily and tried to lick her face through the metal bars. But then something amazing happened. After greeting their mother, the cubs turned around and ran back to David. They climbed up his legs and settled in his lap, purring contentedly. The smallest one even curled up and closed its eyes, as if it was ready for a nap. Razormore's thoughts came through the translator. "They returned to you by choice. This is not what I expected." David gently petted the cubs while looking up at their enormous mother. "I lost my own family 3 years ago," he said, knowing she could sense his emotions even if she didn't understand all his words. "Your babies found me when I was very sad. They helped me feel less alone." The great Vorthak studied him for a long moment. Then she did something that made everyone watching gasp with shock. She lay down on the ground, bringing her huge head closer to David's level. Her voice through the translator was softer now. "You protected them when they were afraid. You fed them when they were hungry. You are, Pack." Kane's voice crackled over the radio. "David, what's happening? Is she going to attack?" "No," David said, amazed at his own calmness. "I think she understands." Razormore turned her head toward the colony buildings. Her thoughts filled the air. "Your people feared us. They prepared for war. But you chose love over fear." Emma stepped forward carefully. "We didn't know the cubs were lost. If we had known, we would have helped search for them." "Your words are truth," Razormore replied. "I sense no deception in your pack." She looked back at David and the cubs. "My young ones are happy with you. This is difficult for me to understand. But I cannot deny what I see and feel." Over the next hour, something unprecedented happened. Other adult Vorthak began approaching the fence, drawn by curiosity. They watched as David played with the cubs, as the babies showed off their climbing skills on his arms and shoulders, as he fed them small pieces of food from his pockets. The translation device picked up conversations among the adult Vorthak. "The 2-leg shows no aggression, he is gentle with the young ones, perhaps we have misunderstood their species." Administrator Bradley's voice came over David's radio. "David, the galactic news networks are calling. Word is spreading about what's happening here. This could change everything between humans and Vorthak." But David wasn't thinking about galactic politics or news reports. He was watching the smallest cub try to teach its siblings how to climb onto his shoulder, their tiny claws tickling as they scrambled up his shirt. As the twin suns began to set, Razormore made a decision that would be remembered throughout the galaxy. She stood up slowly and walked to the fence. Using one massive claw, she carefully drew a symbol in the dirt, the Vorthak Mark IV Pack family. Then she spoke through the translator, her words carrying across the entire colony. "David of the 2 legs, you are pack brother to my cubs. Your colony is under the protection of my family. Any who threaten you threaten us." The other Vorthak howled their agreement, a sound that would have been terrifying hours earlier but now sounded like a celebration. 6 months later, David stood in his new home, a special building constructed between the colony and Vorthak territory. He was officially the first human Vorthak liaison in galactic history, but his real job was much simpler. He took care of orphan cubs and helped his 2 species understand each other. Razormore visited every day, sometimes bringing other Vorthak families to meet the strange human who spoke their language of compassion. The cubs, now half-grown, still preferred sleeping in David's bed, though they needed a much bigger bed now. Emma often came to study the unprecedented relationship between species that had once been enemies. "The Galactic Council wants to name this the Harris Protocol," she told David one morning as he fed breakfast to 3 teenage Vorthak. David smiled, scratching behind the ears of the smallest one, who had grown into a beautiful silver-furred adolescent but still demanded the most attention. "I think they're missing the point. This isn't about protocols or politics. It's just about understanding that everyone, human or Vorthak, sometimes needs someone to care about them." Above them, ships from dozens of worlds arrived daily to witness the miracle of New Haven Colony, where children of two species played together under alien suns, proving that the strongest force in the universe wasn't fear or weapons, but simple kindness between lonely hearts.